What's going on, everybody? It's Tyler, Matt, the FF Mediators. Today, we're going to do a heat check on Chase Brown, the running back for the Cincinnati Bengals. Walk through whether we're buying, selling, or holding on our fantasy teams. Tyler, how are we doing, my friend? Are you ready to talk about Chase Brown? I think we're going to have a different perspective to bring in for people to kind of analyze what they should be doing for their fantasy teams. And let me just kick it straight to you. Walk through what you're feeling about Chase Brown right now.
All right. Well, first off, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Glad to be here. So we actually had a trade that went down between me and you in one of our leagues.
Sure did.
It was a little bit of Darnell Mooney action here. So I sent you Darnell Mooney in a third. For Chase Brown, I really needed the running back depth and a starter for the week. Um, I know Mooney's been playing well, but had to have it. Had the wide receiver depth. Made sense to me. That being said, I mean, we're looking at a player who has actually played really well the last 2 weeks. He's been the running back 3 and the running back 4 the past 2 weeks. He's been playing really well since Zach Moss has went out. I know Coach has some gripes about his pass blocking skills, but I do think that kind of gets counteracted here in fantasy. As last week we saw him have 11 targets, with 9 catches on those, and that's some stat padding, man. That's free points you're going to get no matter what. Um, but I know we kind of have a little bit of disagreement. I think he's a little bit of a buy if you need that running back production. If you've got him, I think you hold him for now. But I think you kind of have a little bit of a different opinion, right?
Yeah, for me, he's a sell. I mean, just kind of looking at the last 2 weeks, yeah, like you said, he had the 11 targets, which is just incredible. So I'm not going to deny his fantasy involvement there. But when I watch him play, he definitely struggles with vision. I think the transactions that the Bengals are making kind of gears me towards they know that they need to solve this problem. They have not been able to rush the ball effectively or efficiently all year. Losing Joe Mixon has been a big impact to this team, and I expect them to try and solve that. While I think Chase Brown is a serviceable player and a guy who will stick around the league and have that role, especially as a pass catcher, I don't think he can handle the 3 down workload that the Bengals have traditionally done. Nor do I think he can handle, really being the guy for the first 2 downs. You mentioned coaches' concerns about him blocking. I do think there's something to be said for that. Just this past week when they were playing Baltimore, they had so many plays where it was third and long or second and long, and they took him out and they brought in 2 tight ends. That says a lot to me. They can't trust him back there to block. So I think they need another body. Obviously, they went out and did some workouts with Leonard Fournette this week. I know you kind of don't look into that too much, and I think that's right. I'm totally with you. If they add Fournette, I'm not worried about that at all for fantasy involvement because, like I said, I think Chase Brown has fantasy value. But for me, the biggest point would be what can I move that for? And I think right now you can move it for a lot. I mean, you mentioned he was what RB3 on the week.
Last week, yeah, he was RB
Yeah.
3 and RB 4 the previous week.
So yeah, 2 really high weeks, and I would try and capitalize on that if I can. I mean, just looking at his adjacent value, if we're talking dynasty, I think there's a lot of names that are interesting. I mean, I'm gonna throw this up here on the screen. Just looking at this, his value has certainly risen, going all the way up to RB17. While I think the volume there is pretty good, I'm not going to pay that. I mean, looking at the adjacent running backs, those are names that I want. I see Jonathan Brooks here. I see Bucky Irving, and I see Tyrone Tracy. Those are all names that are below Chase Brown. So you could trade Chase Brown to the average person and get one of those guys and get something on top of that. Now, that's not going to be in every case. It certainly depends. But for me, I'd much rather have those guys. I think Tracy's going to be really good. I think Bucky Irving's really good. I've certainly spoken a bunch about Bucky Irving in all of our content, and I'm going to continue to do that because I think he's that good of a running back. I mean, Bucky is the inverse, where he can catch the ball like Chase Brown, but his rushing efficiency is unbelievable. He makes one or two dudes miss on every single play. So, Tyler, I'm going to ask you now, just thinking about some names. Well, let's say this is redraft. Would you rather have Chase Brown or Aaron Jones this season for the rest of the year?
That one I'd probably take Chase Brown there. I mean, Aaron Jones is a workhorse, but he can get hurt at any moment, and I don't think his playoff schedule is actually too great. So I'd take Chase Brown there for sure.
Okay. How about Ramondre Stevenson?
That one, see, Ramondre is a very steady. I don't think he's necessarily going to win you a week unless he gets in the end zone multiple times like he did a few weeks ago. But that's a rare occurrence. I'll take the targets of Chase Brown over Ramondre at that point.
Yeah. Well, let's hit some dynasty questions because I know we talk a lot about dynasty. It's kind of our favorite format with Chase Brown. If you were to, peg his value, what would you say his value is right now in dynasty?
I think that depends, really. I mean, I think he's worth at least a second. Probably mid to late would probably be about where I would put it. The later you go, I would say probably at a third there. And keep in mind too, whenever I'm talking about having somebody as a buy or a hold, it's all relative to cost. If you've got somebody that just doesn't believe in him, um, I'd by all means go out and get him for cheap. But I think we all kind of agree, like you said, with Bucky and Tyrone Tracy and those guys that seem to be taking over the running back room a little bit, kind of like how Chase Brown is. I think they might be a little bit more stable per se. But at this point, man, I just see his rest of the season outlook. He's got the targets. I think if T comes back, the offense only moves the ball better. We've seen that evidence already, and I think that lends to a little bit more touchdown upside for him. It's really tough.
Yeah, I think maybe the best way to characterize my belief is if it's redraft, your point to there's not going to be much change because there's not much they can do about it. I think that remains the same. Like Chase Brown's going to be the guy. Zach Moss has been on IR. I don't care about Leonard Fournette. They traded for Herbert. I think Herbert's going to have some sort of involvement. I don't know how much that's going to be. I don't think it necessarily will be 50% of the snaps like Chase Brown was kind of doing earlier with Zach Moss. I mean, Herbert's first play, he fumbled. Like that was just brutal to see. It was tough to watch. So, how much do they trust him? I don't know. I really don't. I know that Chase Brown's going to be out there because they know he can catch the ball and they're going to hand it off to him to try and establish the run. But I think moving forward in the future, more on a dynasty perspective, that's where I have concerns. And that's where I would be looking to sell Chase Brown and try and see if I can either one, upgrade with the names that I've already mentioned. Like if you're a contender and you want to move, or excuse me, if you see a contender and they have Bucky Irving or Tracy, I would certainly try and move Chase Brown for one of those guys and see if I can't get a third. Is that an overpay? Absolutely. But I'd say, hey, that's the tax for you to have the RB3 and RB4 in the last 2 weeks who's getting a ton of volume in an offense that's throwing the ball like crazy. But that's just me. I mean, he still has his bye week to come, so he's going to be missing another week in the future. But I mean, you can't deny the passing volume. And, is that what floats the day for you, Tyler? Or do you believe that his rushing can kind of improve? Because he has several games where he's on efficiency basis has played much better, but it looks to be when he gets the workload, his efficiency kind of goes down.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of where I was getting ready to head. Here recently, like since he's become the workhorse, his targets have went up. That's kind of what's floating him right now, and I think that's a very valuable role that we found in fantasy is when you get that pass catching running back who kind of operates as a bell cow, like it's a gold mine, man. It's just it really is hard to beat. Like you said, he was more efficient earlier in the year when Zach Moss was there. When he was splitting carries with somebody, his yard per carry metric, I mean, his week 2 against Kansas City, who was a stout defense, was 7.75 yards per carry. And I mean, he's got 8.86, 5.33, another week of 5.3. Like he can be efficient. And that's the thing, man. Like, I don't think it's necessarily, bad that he's getting the workload and his efficiency has come down because with that workload increase, he has more opportunities to score. And obviously, it's all about scoring fantasy points at the end of the day. So if you have more opportunities, you're going to have a better chance. I get what you're saying about being concerned, but at this point, I'm not worried about Herbert. If Leonard Fournette does sign, definitely not worried about Leonard Fournette. I mean, the dude's like 29, 30 years old and can't stay on a team at this point. And I even heard a name mentioned about maybe a Gary Brightwell being signed. If that's his competition for the year, I mean, we don't think Zach Moss is coming back. I think rest of the season, man, especially if you're contending, I think he's a good.
Yeah, I think for me, if I can add him to a redraft roster, I'll certainly do it if I need a running back. Like I said, Dynasty, I just have concerns with how committed they will be to him. I mean, he was a day 3 pick a few years ago. And again, that's not to say I think he's fallen out of the league, because I think he's staying in the league and I think he's going to stay involved with the Bengals. It's just a matter of how does this elite offense grow? Because, like I said, they miss Joe Mixon. Like, Joe Mixon has played well for the Texans this year and is showing that, what they can do with a running attack really helps bolster their passing attack. And right now they're one dimensional. And that's going to be something they're going to have to try and solve as they move towards the playoffs and in their playoff push, because right now they're not even a guarantee to make the playoffs. But we'll certainly have to see. But I think that's going to do it for us on Chase Brown. But just to recap, Tyler's buying. He's saying go get that guy. He's going to be an RB1 for the Bengals here to finish out the season. Lots of fantasy value, lots of targets to go and get. For me, I'm going to hold and redraft. If it's Dynasty, I'm selling, and I'm selling quick. Capitalize off those last 2 weeks. Go look at the names that we talked about here, but be sure to let us know in the comments below what you're doing with Chase Brown. Let us know if you've done a recent trade. We'll be interested to know about that. Be sure to follow us on X at the FF Mediators. Subscribe to the YouTube, and please hit that like button. It greatly helps us out. And of course, you can catch us live every single Wednesday at 8:30 Eastern. We'll be live with the Faceoff Sports Network, answering your questions live, real time, about anything having to do with fantasy. But until then, we will see you next.